The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
On May 27th, 1996, as WWF Raw was on commercial, I decided to tune into WCW Nitro. And lo and behold, what was I witnessing? Razor Ramon has invaded WCW Nitro, jumps the railing, goes into the ring, and he declares war? He's there for war? What is going on? Yes, today, 30 years ago, what I thought was Razor Ramon was declaring war on WCW, but little did I know the truth of what was going on. So today, your friendly neighborhood Who fan is going back 30 years with his broskies, talking about that, what I think was historic night on WCW Nitro, Scott Hall declaring war. And how did he say it? Well, needless to say, he said it with an historic promo. And so before we get things going, Scott, do you have anything to say?
You want a war? You're going to get one.
And on that note, welcome everybody back to Oofman Entertainment Presents Gabbin with Oof. I am your host, your friendly neighborhood Oofman, and for this awesome first part of this trilogy that I'm calling a trilogy, I am not alone. I have my fellow NWO-ites with me, my four life brothers over here, C-Rod and Mr. Scheffler. That's like Hogan calling Mr. DiBiase. So, Mr. Scheffler, how are you doing today, Dave?
Doing good. Thank you for having me, Oofman. And we're going to go back in the time machine. 30 years.
We sure are. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're right. We're going to ride shotgun. We're going to let C-Rod drive the DeLorean. C-Rod, we're going back to the year 1996. How are you feeling right now?
I was just a wee boy compared to the two of you, but this is the only black and white that I have to wear. But I wanted to rep black and white colors, and I'm excited to be here yet again for another great installment, another amazing trilogy. Looking forward to all these conversations on an everlasting topic in our hobby and world of wrestling.
Exactly. And that's the thing that's awesome about wrestling and getting together with like-minded people. There's so much to talk about, to gab about. Well, let's get right into it. As the intro saw, we are today, May 27th. Like you said, C-Rod, you were a tiny little one. I was a lowercase oof at home doing what I was doing, watching the Monday Night War, flipping kids Google it with a remote control, Raw and Nitro back and forth. And I remember I was watching Nitro, and I don't even remember who the match was. And I'm like sitting there going like, all right, waiting for Raw to come back from commercial. And then in the background, there's a really tall guy walking down the steps. Wasn't out of the ordinary, but it's like he was a really big guy. He's still walking. The camera pans to him, and I'm like, wait a second. That guy looks awfully familiar. He then jumps the railing, and I'm like, that guy looks like Razor Ramon. And I was like, what? He was just on WWF television like a couple weeks ago or a pay-per-view. I think he lost to Goldust or something like that. And he jumps in the ring, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Razor Ramon has invaded WCW Nitro. He goes in the ring, and he does what I think was one heck of a very historical promo, declaring war on WCW. So real fast, we'll just take it slowly but surely. So, Dave, join with me. So, you were watching as well. What was going through your mind when you saw what we thought was Razor Ramon in a WCW ring with the accent, with the toothpick? What was going through your mind at that moment?
I said, "Oh my gosh, it's crazy." I was thinking back to the first Nitro when Lex Luger showed up in the middle of a match. And the night before, he was on a taping with WWE or WWF at the time.
Yep.
But I was like, I heard Shivani saying I wanted to go back and watch this and do the remembering of it. And hearing Shivani say, "Who's that? Who's that? What is he doing here?" It's like, and him and Hina were so hilarious. And it's like, oh my gosh, we got something going on, and then him getting in the ring and just stopping a match in the middle of it. It was just a crazy time.
Insanity, as I think a word would say. C-Rod, you said it earlier. You were a wee little C back then, but what do you remember watching again? What we all thought Razor Ramon is in WCW? What the heck?
you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. And
Exactly.
I think that was all of us. I had mentioned this during the Owen Hart episode that we did, that I was just getting into wrestling around those years, 94, 95, 96, but I was actually a WCW guy, not a WCW guy. I was a kid, probably just, it was free on TBS, and it's probably why I was watching it. Wasn't allowed to stay up late to watch Raw or anything like that. But I knew who Razor Ramon was. I knew the machismo, and I knew the vignettes that he was putting out in WWF. That I have like a very vivid memory of Razor Ramon, and I just remember him showing up, and I was like, I know that this guy is from WWF. I know who he is. I know Big Diesel. And I don't know, when the last time you guys watched this debut was, but there's no pop from the crowd. There's no heat from the crowd. Everybody's just like, it's very silent, but it's not a bad silence. It's confusion. Is the way that I would look at it. And that's
Perfect word. Yeah.
that's how I was.
Yeah.
This was right around the time when they were doing the battles. They were making the videos of it, of one another. WCW and WWF were making fun of each other, and I think that this was the first real time in wrestling where it felt real. It felt like, why is a WWF guy here? This is not scripted. This is not entertainment. What's going on? And it would, seem to unfold. But that's what I remember.
Yeah, and Dave, you're right. It kind of reminded me as well of when Luger walked into the Mall of America, and again, Bobby on cue. "Oh, this is a public place; he's allowed to be here." But I think when again Razor at the time showed up, it was more chaotic because it was the first episode of Nitro. Everyone was checking it out. It's this new federation. You had Hogan and Singh in the ring, I believe. Then Lex Luger came out, and there was a little bit of ruffling of the feathers. There was starting to get a little rowdy in the crowd noise because people, again, Lex Luger was just on the house show that, if those that don't know, that night before, that Sunday night before, he was at a house show somewhere. And then the very 24 hours later, he is walking on the set of WCW Nitro. And again, for those who don't know, according to what Lex Luger said in interviews and other documentaries, he only had a handshake deal with Vince and the WWF. So he could technically freely walk away from the WWF, and he signed with WCW. Sting was the catalyst to get him in. And so he did pop up on Nitro. But now on this date, on May 27th, 1996, like you said, C-Rod, the Monday Night War, it started in September. So now we are in May of 96. Though, like you said, the war hadn't started yet. It was there. Yeah, it was really Nitro taking shots at Raw. We had Bischoff, since Raw back in the day used to tape live, then tape the next Tuesday, air it the following week. They had that alternating schedule. Say what you want about his practices, but Bischoff would reveal on the days that Raw was taped, he would reveal the results. I would catch that, like, he just said Goldust is winning? What? And all that. It backfired later, which we'll get into in another time, of when he announced, actually it wasn't him, it was Tony Schiavone, announced somebody winning a certain title. That completely fell flat in their face. But at the time, yes, he was doing things you want to talk about off script or on etiquette and against the rules. But in a way, I kind of don't blame Bischoff for doing that. He was a producer of a show. Again, I don't know if the execs at TNT put his back against the wall. We all know, again, he died this month, but Ted Turner wanted to compete. He's the only guy that really had the money and the resources to compete with Vince. It's not like the UWF back in the day with Herb Abrams and all that jazz. That was a completely disaster, but he was the one guy that wanted to compete with Vince, and he had the number one thing was with Ted Turner was he had the resources. So they were doing things out of the blue. So you can say, sure, Lex Luger showed up on the first Nitro in the mall. Then we had the infamous Alundra Blaze. What does she think about the women's WWF championship?
Dumping the garbage.
So you got to give WCW some credit for taking, quote unquote, the war to Vince. But the whole thing was you could even say, like, oh, that looked like Alundra Blaze. Well, she did say that. She's like, you used to call me Alundra Blaze, but now she went back to her Medusa name. But she'd been in WCW before. Luger, the same. He'd been in WCW as well. But the difference, I think, and I'll let you guys want to hear your opinions on it. When Lex Luger was in WCW, when it was an NWA WCW merger back then, he was popular. He was the champion. Alundra Blaze was part of the Heyman family. She was known. Scott Hall, and then later his big surprise, they were part of WCW, but they weren't as big, I think, as Luger and Alundra and Medusa were. So us, and like C-Rod said, all of us were really young. 30 years is 30 years. So we were all, again, watching both companies at that time. So my question to you, C-Rod, I'll pass it up to you first. Are you like me where you think Razor or Scott Hall's return to WCW was more bigger that one night than I'd say Luger and Alundra Blaze in December? Luger being in September and then Alundra in December?
Yeah, it's funny. When you think of Lex Luger, you think of WCW through and through. I don't really ever see him. I don't ever think of him as a WWF guy.
Right.
Just because, like you said, he was WCW. He was immensely popular. He was a champion there before he went to WWF. Kind of, similar to Ric Flair. While, again, Ric Flair was in WWE, WWF. He's a WCW guy. He came up in Jim Crockett Promotions. He was all WCW. They may have had some time in WWF, but I don't look at Scott Hall as a WCW guy because he did not get big until Razor Ramon blew up. And then
right.
he, I'm sure we'll start talking about it, but he had his differences of where he thought that character was going, and he came back to WCW. But when he came back, I think it was, this is a WWF guy. So I absolutely believe that Scott Hall's Razor Ramon's, crossover was so much bigger than, Lex coming over or Blaze as well.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Dave, same question. You feel Scott Hall's return was a bigger impact than Luger and Medusa returning to WCW?
I definitely do. Just like you guys have said, it was the way Lex Luger had been there before. Scott Hall, this was a total shocker because they didn't know, had no clue. This was absolute, and I'm glad it was before social media and everything, because you could hide this and no one had a clue. They talked that I saw the stories years ago about Bischoff on his podcast about how they hit him, how they had said this is what's going to happen. The things that they did to protect this and to make it as big as possible. And also, like you guys have said, Scott Hall was a WWF guy, and before he may have been in WCW, but nowhere near what he was in WWF. And he came there from the AWA back before you got, even before Oofman, you were watching probably, because I watched him in the AWA when he was on tag team with Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, before he was Mr. Perfect. So this was a definite surprise. And C-Rob made a great point, because I watched it back this past weekend, how quiet it was. I think it was, like you said, it was confusion. Like, is that who I think it is? As WWE getting business, or WWF getting in business with the WCW, what's going on? Because people were just shocked. I think they were just quiet because of the shock value of it. And it was just something that we'll never see again, especially in the technology age now and with the social media. We'll never see anything like this ever again, because you couldn't ever make it to this.
Also, Dave, to your point, the free agency back then, it can't happen now because of, what is it, a 90-day
the 90-day clause.
90 days, right? Yeah.
No compete, yeah, the 90-day no compete, or 60-day, yeah.
The 90, whatever the non-compete is, they couldn't, the next day be somewhere like it was back in the day. And to Dave's point too about Eric Bischoff's, or whoever mentioned about Eric Bischoff's podcast, 83 Weeks, it's a great podcast, and he talks about this so much. Like the whole premise of his podcast is about this, and how much work and what they had to do to basically buy these guys, the guaranteed money he threw, the easier schedules, but we'll never see anything like that ever again. And not only because of social media, but the whole free agency non-compete, they can't go anywhere, and there can't really, there's no shock value anymore. It's like, I know this person's gone. We'll see them in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. And that money, R.I.P. to Ted Turner. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Oofman.
Go ahead.
You can go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go
Again,
ahead.
R.I.P. Like you said, Ted Turner, because that open checkbook came from him. He said, "Do what you can." Because I truly think, I don't think he liked Vince McMahon. Period. In real life, I think he was going to give the big fu to him, and he was going to do whatever it took, and he had the money and the backing to do it, and that's why he said to Eric, and Eric says this too. He said, "Do what you need to do. Go against them. Do it." And I think he gave him an open checkbook. Go get whoever you have to get to do this.
Yeah, and on that note, I think it was in a recent interview, Bischoff said, because again, that was the whole myth, like he had an open checkbook. But according to Bischoff, and I'll take his word if he says it, believe it or not, it's coming from a pretty good reliable source. He said that Turner not only kind of gave him an open checkbook, but he basically didn't want to, again, according to Bischoff, Turner didn't want to really like put his stamp on anything. If anybody was going to cost, or anything was going to cost him less than $1 million. So if a wrestler came in and they were, let's just say it was like 500,000, Bischoff could go to, I guess, their financial group, get a check and sign him. But anything over $1 million, I guess that would probably be like Hogan-esque, because I'm sure he got more than 6 or 7 figures. So Bischoff himself has admitted that, not that Turner didn't care, but yeah, like you said, Dave, he basically said like, look, let's compete. And he gave Bischoff basically free will to do what he wanted. But anything that was over $1 million, then Ted would have to give his blessing for it. So you have to wonder what the contract would be. And just going back to the return premiere of Razor Ramon, the fact that he came back, he had the accent, he had the hair slicked back, he was dressed like Razor, but not like the Razor we knew, like with the silk shirts and the dress pants. He was like in regular jean, I believe it was a blue shirt and blue jeans, but he still had the accent. When he walked in, he said, hey, yo. I believe that was the first time we heard "Hey yo" in WCW. I think Sierra and I joked about this a while back off camera. His accent was a little dingly, where it's like he's talking with an American accent. Oh, there's the Cuban. But I guess he knew that he would probably get in trouble. They did later on, which we'll talk about in another time, about the WWF going after them for copyright infringement. But he walked the line so perfectly that, again, we all sat there and confused. And then after he did that awesome quote unquote debut promo, he came back at the end to confront Bischoff, because he kept calling him that weather guy wannabe and all that. So it's like, I guess he's referring to Bischoff about that. So then finally at the end, when Nitro was about to end, he confronts Bischoff. And again, hats off to all of them. They all played it well. Bischoff played this scared guy. Again, 14-year-old me didn't know. Oh, actually, I was 15 by then. So 15-year-old me didn't know that Bischoff was the producer, the head guy of WCW, like Vince was the owner in WWF. So I sat there going like, man, Razor's really bugging Bischoff. But then the way Bischoff was answering, like, oh, okay, that must mean that Bischoff is a big deal. And he kept saying like, I want to fight. Let's do it in the ring where it matters. And it's like, all right. So again, 15-year-old me was sitting there going like you said, Dave, did WCW really make a deal with WWF? Are they like co-producing this monster pay-per-view? Because later on we had the invasion and talk about TNA, WWE today in 2026. But in 1996, to hear the two big companies actually coming together, again, I think I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And again, I think we spoke about it. I don't know if it was in this chat or another chat, or I think it was with Gino. Shout out to Gino out there. It's not like in today's world where it doesn't feel like the product is hot enough where you'll watch a Raw, you watch a SmackDown, and then you want to flip a coin if you want to tune in. Back then in the Attitude Era, whether it be Raw or SmackDown, Raw, SmackDown, or Nitro, they left you hanging with so much great thing where it's like there was, like you said, Dave, there was no social media. There was no really dirt sheets, websites and all that. No one breaking news or anything, where the show would end and you had no choice but to tune in. And it worked both on Raw and Nitro. And on this night particular, the way Razor left it, he's like, I want to fight. Well, we'll talk about it real fast. We can segue into it, where the following week, I tuned in. I'm not gonna lie. I think I gave my ratings a little bit more to Nitro than Raw, and I'm waiting. Where is Razor? He didn't come out the entire show, so I think I was ready to give up. where at the end of the show, he popped up. It's like, oh, there he is. There's Razor. And that's where he confronts Sting. And so we got a fight. We have a shoving thing going on. So on there, right there, they were doing I believe, must watch television where you had to tune in the next week to see what was happening. Again, I remember going to school the next day, talking with my friends, going like, dudes, Razor's in WCW. And we were like, he is. And it messed with our heads. So on that note, C-Rod, so from one week to another, how good did WCW hook you when it came to this angle, seeing, again, quote unquote, Razor Ramon in WCW? And did it make you want to tune in to watch Nitro? Was your attention, as a WF guy, was your attention slowly going away from the WF to WCW? Or like, how, as a younger kid than me and Dave, how were you gripped by this storyline?
What a time to be alive. What a time to be a wrestling fan. It's, you know, in conversations that I have, I talk about nostalgia all the time, especially coming up to 40 years old. And I feel like we're getting to that old age of back in my day wrestling, but wrestling was just so good. And there's a reason that the Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era are still talked about almost constantly in wrestling. I mean, and it wasn't even that long.
They're always talking about it. The video game is based about it. Yeah, you're right.
And it was only a few years in the grand scheme of how long wrestling has been around. It was only a few short years, but my God, were they just it? You said it. It was must watch TV, and it wasn't just WCW. It was then WWF, because I think a month after Scott Hall came, we got the famous 316 line, and then now all of a sudden Stone Cold blowing up on Monday. You know, and it's, how do you choose what to watch? Because there was no, you couldn't record. Well, you could do what I did, where you take the VCR and you put it on your parents' TV.
VCR,
in there. You have to have two, one in your living room, one in the cellar or your parents' room. I feel you, brother.
or you're running back and forth to multiple TVs. What's going on? But
I got VCR tapes still back from then.
So, me too. Me too. Yeah.
It was great. It was great. And I do have to correct you. I was a WCW guy.
Oh,
so
my bad.
This kept me here. This kept until, a few months later, right? Because then it started to merge and you had to watch both because you had to see what one was talking about. I was WCW. This kept me. I'll never forget this angle. I'll never forget having to run home and watch TV every week and just waiting to see what happens and just thinking about it. And even going back and watching it now, it's just like, man, everybody involved was just so good. And say what you want about Eric Bischoff, but I loved him going after Vince McMahon. Like, that created competition. And even if Tony Khan wanted to do that today, he couldn't. It's a different game. It's a different world.
Yeah, I agree.
It's, professionalism. Back then they didn't care. There was no.
Bischoff made WWE better. He made McMahon do better.
Yeah, 100%. And they could get that kick in the ass in today's world because they need a better product. That's a conversation and a gab of another time. But long story short, to answer your question and let Dave get a turn, must watch TV, and I'll never forget it.
Exactly. Yeah. So Dave, same thing. So how good of a job did Bischoff and his creative team do? Did they hook you? Did they really, again, you were more of a WWF guy, I believe, than WCW. So did they grab you? Were you tending to lean to start watching Nitro more than Raw? How were you going these 2 weeks?
He caught something in a bottle. He caught lightning in a bottle. That's why he did, Bischoff. And
yep, a good way to put it.
And that's why Turner was the best thing that ever happened to WCW, because believe it or not, I was a WCW guy too back in the day when they were on Saturday mornings, because like Chris said, they were on free TV. They were on free TV that I could see on UHF stations. If you want to get really old school, that I watched back in Chicago, and I remember, and I still see the old highlights of Crockett Promotions and stuff. I watched World Class Championship, all those, because back then the guys in WCW or NWA could go all across the promotions back then too, and you'd see them everywhere. And but definitely Bischoff. I mean, it was a genius. Everything was geniusly. It was set up, and even though, like C. Rod said, it was only a few years, but those few years probably were the biggest years in wrestling, except for the beginning of Hulkamania, maybe, because
Yeah, the
that's
80s
what
boom,
really
yeah.
obviously Hulkamania started the wrestling movement, the real
Right.
wrestling movement that made a big business. But this is what kept people. It's kind of I kind of put it like towards baseball. Baseball had a strike in '94. Everybody wasn't, or I mean, a strike back before. I think it was '94. But
Yeah,
after
it was
that,
94, yeah.
then you had the home run derby with Sosa and McGuire running after Maris's title, and that's what brought people back to it.
Yep.
I kind of equate that to this. The Monday Night Wars brought people to wrestling and brought some old people back, and it brought new people in. And I think that's what it skyrocketed. I mean, it just made the business skyrocket, and you saw more wrestling. You saw more wrestling fans than you'd ever seen before. Because I mean, I'm back again. I'm back. I watched wrestling in the late '70s, where it was Dick the Bruiser and guys like that who were old school, where they didn't have the physiques. They looked like beer belly guys, but they were just brawlers back then. So this definitely it was a major needle mover for the whole profession of wrestling.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Great points. And I'll address that, what you said, C-Rod. And again, I'll ask you guys your opinions. So again, we are basically at the, want to call it the infancy of the NWO. Yeah. Week 1 of Scott Hall returning, invading, and then week 2 confronting Sting, promising a big surprise next week. So on that note, C-Rod, you kind of said it. What I want to know from you guys is, we just experienced, or let's call it week 2 of the NWO's infancy. We just saw how one guy returned or made his re-debut to the company, how gripping that story was, that we really started to pay attention. We were flipping the channels or recording, like you guys said, one TV and another. So my question to you guys is, how can wrestling today learn from just these 2 little weeks? We haven't gotten to the big reveal and we haven't gotten to the third man. So in your opinion, we've seen what one guy did in these 2 weeks to get the ball rolling on not only competition between the two companies, competition against like your friends and your schoolmates, but it was competition to make both companies better. And I think you nailed it perfectly, C-Rod, when you said it's not going to happen today. But my question is, can it happen today with, again, God bless AEW, been a fan myself since day one. I cannot stand it when I see other supposedly fans saying, oh, Tony should go on Monday nights. I think that would be a disaster. So in your mind, C-Rod, these 2 little weeks, did it prove to you that look how good competition is, that it lit a fire under Vince McMahon to get things rolling? Again, we haven't even gotten to July, which we will in part 3, but there's just with these 2 little weeks, how the attention started to, let's say, drift away from Raw a little bit now into Nitro. What do you think is missing in today where we could get that again? Again, we all watch WWE. Some of us try to watch it. I'm guilty of that. We just hope that, like with AEW, why AEW is a good thing that it's around. What can it be? What's it going to take for either company to, again, we just came off a great pay-per-view this past Sunday, a Double or Nothing, yay AEW, but what is it that in today's world is missing from, again, just those 2 little weeks back in '96 to make wrestling like fun again? What do you think your opinion is on that? I know it's loaded. I'm sorry.
Well,
no wrong answers here. No wrong answers, for the record. No wrong answers, just opinions.
It's funny because it's business. Business has ruined wrestling. Back then, Ted Turner wanted wrestling. Nobody else at TBS thought that wrestling could exist in that world on their network, and he wanted it. Vince, as much as you can say about Vince is wrestling, and all Vince ever wanted to do was bring a good wrestling product to the wrestling industry and the wrestling fans. That's all he ever wanted. And that passion from those 2 guys will never be in the TKO board. It will never be in Tony Khan as long as he has daddy's money and he doesn't have to work for it. He might like wrestling, but to him, that's a toy, you know, unless he's like, I'm going to take TKO down and I'm going to make this my business is going to be the best business. And I'm going to separate myself from Daddy Khan and his money and what he's doing over there. Tony doesn't have anything to walk in. He didn't make anything. His dad gave him everything. Cody grew AEW, put it on the map. He just kind of put the money in there and he's letting that ship run. But if one day he was like, you know what, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to go after TKO. I don't understand why he would. He doesn't need to.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and take the fight to them in some way. Like the passion. That's it. The passion's missing. It's business and it's no longer a passion.
That's true. And the thing is, it was business back then, but back in the day, the business, they depended on our ratings. They depended on our pay-per-view buys. Nowadays, I think I saw a Michael Jordan interview where he just was comparing his era, and I think Charles Barkley was with him. They were comparing their era versus today's world. And like you said, back in his day, and Charles Barkley and all them guys in the 80s, they had to pay, they weren't signed to these immediate contracts. Like everybody talked about Air Jordan. Well, if you saw The Last Dance, Air Jordan came later after Jordan made his debut because Nike wanted to get behind Jordan, but like, all right, they had to be sure this was the guy, and he earned his contract to Nike. It wasn't like he signed his contract with the Bulls and then the next day Nike was calling him. No, it took a while for Nike to reach to him. And in today's world, any college kid who declares to the NBA, they get drafted, they're given billions of dollars already. And so that's why the whole Jordan and all those guys from back in the day, they're angry that these guys don't play the 82 games. Jordan played 82 games almost every season. I think it was his sophomore year in the basketball when he broke his foot. He didn't play the 82. So they wonder, like, they kind of said this generation's kind of lazy. He said it without saying it. So I guess the same way with wrestling in the 90s was the same. They depended on your ratings in mind. They depended on us calling our cable provider for the pay-per-view. Yes, Erod.
But what did this exact thing that we're talking about change? Because
the guarantee, I guess.
The reason Scott Hall and Nash came over, they wanted to work. They wanted to work less, and they wanted more money. And
which
and
they
that's
got. Yeah.
This was that transition. Once WCW folded and WWF was the only thing remaining, WWE was the only thing remaining, then the business took over and people were just making money hand over foot, and streaming started, and TV, right now the WWE could probably not sell a single ticket into
and still be profitable. Yeah.
And they'll still make billions off of the TV deals,
it's like
streaming and everything else. They don't.
It's like they sold their soul to the devil, basically.
Name TKO, yeah. Basically, yeah. All right, Dave, same question. That fire we saw in the Monday Night Wars, but most specifically, amazing how these 2 little weeks, one guy started to change the trajectory of the business. Could it one day return, or what will it take for it to return? Does TKO need to literally step aside? Like, how can fans be passionate about wrestling as we were in 1996?
I think C-Rod hit the nail on the head, and I think it all goes to the name of a movie, For the Love of the Game. And with TKO and the businesses taking over, unless it goes back to family, I don't think we ever get back to exactly where we were. Because like he said, Vince, it was about family. That was a generational company. It was owned by generations of McMahons, not just one. And when they sold the TKO, it signaled the end of a family-owned business, like Crockett, like all these things. These people did it for the love of wrestling. That's why Turner did. Turner didn't do it for money. He just said he liked wrestling. He went on his network, like C-Rod said. It was the love of this wrestling. It just was, but you don't have that anymore. And like he said, Tony Khan is like a toy. I think the best bet for him is if he ever got someone who knew wrestling or who had the love of the wrestling that could help run it, and not him. I mean, Mick Foley is a good example. I don't want to see him ever wrestle again. But if he ever got
I agree.
it's just like Shane McMahon when they almost had him. I think if you got certain people to take over creative for him, I think that would help them immensely. Now, I could tell you from the beginning, and nothing against every AEW from because I definitely want them to succeed, even though
Right.
I've been critical as much as the next person of them. In the beginning, what created AEW other than Khan's money? It was guys like Rhodes, Cody Rhodes, who came from Dusty, who came from the family of wrestling,
Mhm.
who bled,
Yep.
who sweat wrestling from the time they were a baby. And it came from Jericho. Jericho, he's been doing this since he was in his early 20s, and he's the love of it. That's why he's still in it. He
Yep.
loves it's not, I don't think it's the money. If it was the money, I think he could easily got even more. I think he loves it. That's why guys like him and Mysterio are still around. I mean, I just don't think it could ever get back to there. It may be able to get close if they could but because I don't think once you got corporate involved totally with TKO, I don't think he can go back at all at this point.
Right.
I don't think there'll ever be
Yeah.
a family that could take over a wrestling organization again because I don't think it's possible. I just don't.
Right.
I hate seeing that. I mean, we're still all passionate and we love wrestling no matter what. It's just that I don't think we'll ever see anything like we saw with that era ever again. And for that, and you could just go with the memories of being in that short period of time that we had that
Yep.
I was there. I got to see that era, you know,
Hmm.
I got to be involved. And it's like, it just could hope that one day that somehow maybe TKO will let the reins off, but I just don't think so. And if Tony goes against any show, if he ever wanted to, it shouldn't be Monday. He might as well go against SmackDown on Friday because SmackDown has been a horrible show for months.
Hmm.
I don't know what happened. SmackDown when they were on Fox, they put them on Fox because they were doing some good shows, and I don't know what's happened and why the difference in Raw and SmackDown. I just don't understand the thinking, and it's just, and I don't know if they're going back to some house shows just to try to please people who've been upset about it in the back. I mean, they mentioned it the other day. Cody has been pushing for house shows to get people more in sync because I think the less practice, the more the botches lately, and the more the mess ups in the ring, and that the younger people need more seasoning, and it would be help people in NXT to get house shows because they'll get known. I think, and I don't know if that's just to try to please somebody or they were told, you got to do some more, you got to get more for your money with these guys. I don't
Right.
know. I'm not sure what's going on with that.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, but sadly, yeah, like you guys have been saying, it's mostly been the passion that's been gone. And again, I would like to see that fire return from both companies. And it was
Mhm.
kind of there when AEW did start. We heard the stories that Vince was citing. We heard, I think it was Gallows and what's his face. They were about to leave, but
Anderson.
then Anderson
Yep.
and Gallows were about to leave WWE. Maybe they were going to go to AEW, and then Vince gave him like $60 kajillion, and all for what? 6 months later, they got cut. And so the threat, quote unquote, the threat is there from AEW. And I don't want, like I said, I don't want to see AEW, I don't know, where challenge them and go on Mondays or stuff like that. AEW should stay, I believe, on Wednesdays, but they are ruffling the feathers, they're rattling the chains a little bit. Where I hope, like we were talking right now, we hope that it goes back to how it was 30 years ago and in that wonderful era of the Attitude Era. I mean, we can talk about the highs and lows later, but those two specific weeks of when the change was in the air, something was in the air that we were going to witness something brand new. It started getting us fans, and it worked perfectly. I know, I can tell you from experience, I fell right into it of getting the clicker, that remote control. where I started to kind of shift my attention to Nitro more than Raw. Because again, I did like Razor Ramon and his big surprise later on. I was a fan of theirs. Obviously, I'm the Bret Hart guy, but whatever. But I did enjoy those characters, and the way that, especially that Hall presented himself on that Nitro 30 years ago, I bought it completely. And say what you will about Bischoff, he got the idea from an angle from New Japan or All Japan, whatever. I mean, in wrestling, how many times can you come up with great creative things? They were working. They probably didn't know what they had in front of them, but for us fans, and again, I can speak from experience. They had me hook, line, and sinker. I was caught, and just like today, there were really no sport. Not that I remember. It was the early days of the internet. Anybody remember AOL? I had it. I got it in, I think, like early '96. I got it. But I didn't know there was even though the Observer was around, but it was printed. I don't think it had the website just yet. Don't quote me. Someone can quote me on that. Gab about it in the comments. So I didn't check that out. There was no DQ. Shout out to the boss, Aaron. There was no DQ in '96. So like you guys are saying, there was no social media, no real way to know what is going to happen the next week. Unlike today. Again, today, I don't know about you guys, but spoilers don't really bother me when it comes to movies or wrestling. If I find out, for instance, it's the worst kept secret, the New Day got released, we all know, and I think we all want them to go to AEW. Most likely, knock on wood, they will. Edge and Cope and Christian just won the tag titles this past Sunday at Double or Nothing. We can finally get that dream match of, let's call them Edge and Christian and the New Day against the Bucks, against FTR. I just named 4 awesome teams. Maybe that'll happen in All In. So the buzz is there, but what I am just like you guys, what I miss is that like like, oh, give me more. We're quoting Ryback.
Feed me more.
Exactly. Of all people quote, we're quoting Ryback. Where back then, like I said, Nitro would end, Raw would end. I would go to school. Shout out to my boy Keith. We would talk about it like, yo, did you see last night? And we had to go through Tuesday through Sunday, and then finally Monday, get to school. All right, run home, do our homework. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, let's watch it. And then, like I said, call the tactics, however you want to call it. I'm sitting there going like, Bischoff is telling me everything that's happening on Raw. So in my 15-year-old brain's going, then why do I have to watch Raw? Screw this, I watch Nitro. And I did. But again, though, that second week, all right, oh, he's gone. Oh, whatever. All right, it's about to end. Cool. Shivani and the brain are just wrapping it up. Boop, there he is. Like, oh, he is back. And again, we'll end it with this. So Scott Hall returns. He confronts Bischoff, asking for those guys. Sting comes to finally challenge him. And Razor wants 3 guys, a 3-on-3 match. And Sting's kind of like hitting him with logic. He's like, you're asking for 3-on-3? I see 1-on-1. Let's do this now. He shoves him. Scott Hall's about to attack, but he holds back. He's like, okay, this is how you want to do it? So, all right, I have a surprise for you next week. No, I have a big surprise for you next week. He flips his toothpick at him. And again, he left us hanging because, again, at the moment, we didn't know what did he mean? A big surprise? Like, who could that be? And then I think my 15-year-old brain went through my Rolodex of like the WWF roster, like who's a big guy? And I didn't even think of who that guy was. His name didn't come up because, again, we just saw them again on TV.
Right.
Who could he bring in? Did Hogan ever pop my head? Not really. He was away. I just remember them showing vignettes of Hogan. So I'm like, it can't be Hogan. So no, it's not Macho Man. I'm like, who is this big surprise? So on that note, again, I'm going to leave our viewers hanging because next time we come back to episode 25, or not episode 25, I'm sorry, when we do part 2 of the nWo 30th anniversary, which will be in 2 weeks, because on June 10th, 1996, Scott Hall returned to confront Eric Bischoff, and he brought that big surprise to Nitro. So we're going to hang it out here. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this crusade back to 1996. It's, like I said earlier, it's always fun to reminisce and just to talk about how 30 years does sound a lot. Again, I was 15. I'm going on 45. So that does sound a lot, but it's not like we're, no offense, Dave, it's not like we're talking about wrestling from the 70s and talking about 2026.
None taken.
We're just talking 1996 versus 2026. And in these 30 years, it's amazing how this product that we all love, again, we thank God for this community. We thank Aaron. We thank Gino and everybody else from No D Crew. We've all come together. We have a new friend in C-Rod as well. He's doing awesome with his stuff. How we all can reminisce and just think about how things have changed. And again, 30 years is just 30 years, but We wish we can go back. We can't, unfortunately. There is no DeLorean. Sorry, there's no plutonium I can buy in the corner store. So we can't go back, but it's great to reminisce. It's great to meet people like you guys and everybody else from the crew to reminisce and just to see how we were back then. How are we now? How is the future looking? So on that note, Dave, where can the fine people out there find you throughout the intranet?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. And I want to say Scott Hall referred to Macho Man as the Nacho Man.
Right, he was working the line. He was working the line. That's what called me. Nacho Man,
Huckster,
Gene, Billionaire Ted. He was walking the line. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
He was so hilarious. I loved it. And but you can find me on Facebook on No DQ with our buddy Gino on Major Push Wrestling. And shout out to those guys. And as you said, we have a great community. We thank Aaron for all of us meeting at No DQ, and it's built us a big bunch of friends who can talk about not only wrestling but life itself. And we all get along, and we can agree to disagree, but we always do it in good fun and good nature. And I'm blessed to have you guys as friends, and blessed to be able to be on here and just talk old school wrestling with y'all. And I thank you again, Oofman.
Yeah, no problem, Dave. And C-Rod, where can the fine people out there find your handsome face besides here?
You can find me at Crods Pod every Thursday, the You Good podcast. We talk mental health. You can find me here. You can find me on Major Push Wrestling, making my ways through the channels with this fine network. And the last thing that I want to leave, Oofman, with, obviously, thank you for having me on this episode. Scott Hall is one of my favorite wrestlers, obviously. Rest in peace. And I want to say the one thing that is crazy is Scott Hall was never a world champion. And
no, it was a crime, I think.
What's that?
I think it was a crime that he wasn't world champion.
It was.
Crime. Yes, a crime. I agree. You watch documentaries about Scott Hall, especially after his passing, and the one thing that you hear is how younger wrestlers learned psychology from him. He understood selling, character work, crowd manipulation. He was one of the most respected minds in history. And because of drugs and alcohol, he never got to be that top guy. He never got to be that champion. Unfortunately, when we lost him, that's where he got a lot of his flowers, just because of a lot of the behind the scenes thing. But my hot take here is Hulk Hogan changed history with the NWO. I think Nash was important, but honestly and personally, I don't think that Kevin Nash was great, whatever you want to put. I would have liked to see the roles split.
I kind of agree. I'll join you.
I don't think the NWO works without Scott Hall, and I think there's a reason he came in 100%
first. Agree.
Yeah, he was picked for a reason. You're right, 100%.
He made it feel real. I mean, again, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about how good of a crowd manipulator was. His philosophy was slow things down. Let these moments register. Where in today's world, it's 5-second clip, 10-second clip. Give me that spot. Give me that moment. Scott Hall was let it burn. Don't hit Sting. Give him another week. Don't tell him who these people are. Give him another week. I guarantee you that most of that architecture was Scott Hall, because one of the reasons Bischoff, or one of the reasons he came over to be with WCW was Bischoff said, you get, a creative say. And I think that's, I want to put that out there for anybody who doesn't know who Scott Hall is, who Razor Ramon is, who the NWO are. He's the architect behind all of it. And one of the biggest reasons that the wrestling has that psychology and that character work that we see today.
Well, he was definitely the perfect. You are so right. He was the perfect fit to be the number one person. And we could talk about it later when we talk about Hulk Hogan, but it wasn't only Hulk Hogan that was considered for that third man, but we could talk about that in the next episode's spoiler coming up. But he was the fair warning. He was definitely a catalyst, and they picked him for a reason. And you got it right, C-Rod. Every time every organization Scott Hall's been in, and I've seen highlights of him everywhere. He has you could see the growth in him from the first time I watched him to what he was when he got to be that main guy. And I say he's the main guy too, because I think Kevin Nash, I consider him the big muscle of it. That's it. Because I don't think he was the catalyst. I think you had Scott and then, of course, Hulk that really poured that. I think Kevin Nash was a good supporting actor to it, but that's about it. I totally agree with you.
Kevin Nash
No,
sucks.
exactly. It just is his charisma, literally his charisma. He did ooze machismo. I
His
mean, it wasn't just a
machismo,
kid.
baby.
He oozed it himself. Yes. So on that note, so again, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this little mini trilogy in Oofman Entertainment, ending part 1 of the celebration of 30 years since the NWO's creation. And again, I'm leaving our viewers with the suspense here, where we kind of combined the 2 weeks. The debut today, 27th of May, 30 years ago, Scott Hall returning to WCW. The following week on Nitro, he didn't show up till the end when he confronted Sting finally. Sting used logic. He's like, let's fight you and me. But he's like, no, let's do 3-on-3. And he left them wondering that the following week, which will be the date, would be June 10th, that he said he would bring a big surprise. So that's what we're going to talk about in part 2 of this 30th anniversary commemorative edition of the birth of the NWO, who that big surprise was. And again, we'll go back to what we were kind of talking about today. How did this second guy bring attention to us, to the product? And then it will all lead us to that fateful night of July to 1996 at Bash at the Beach, when we finally have WCW versus the Outsiders, with the third man lurking. And then I think all our jaws dropped when we found out who that third guy was. But until then, thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't yet, and as always, God bless. Please take care of yourself, everybody around you, and remember, when you're NWO for life. Good night, everybody.
The preceding announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.